Morning, boys and gerbils. Today, continuing in our civilian resistance operations series of videos, we're going to talk about pistols today and philosophy of use on pistols. So, a lot of guys are carrying pistols as part of their line gear, right? Got a belt, right? And on their belt, they have a full-size handgun. And that's not necessarily bad. But what I want to talk about today is philosophy of use for pistols and the coming unpleasantness, and when not to have pistols, and what those pistols need to look like form factor wise from a capability standpoint. Now, first, before we start showing off the gear, by the way, these are not gear reviews. And if you're nerding out on gear reviews with this shit that we've been posting, please fix yourself. These are philosophical conversations for the preservation of life and the coming unpleasantness so that you can operate in your local environment for the preservation of life. Okay? These are not gear reviews. Right? Nothing against hop and brass facts and all the other semi-autistic nerds out there out in the desert. I watch your shit too. Thank you, Mazel Tov. Nothing fancy, the OG. This is not that. This is actually philosophically how to employ this shit if we need it for the preservation of life. So, that being said, let's talk about pistols. The first thing we need to understand that everybody gets wrong, okay? There are at least 3 different roles in a resistance organization. I've told you to read ROC, Resistance Operating Concept by Otto C. Fiala. Okay, that recommendation came from Pastor Joe Fox of Viking Preparedness years ago. Okay, years ago, PJ started talking about ROC. And ROC is predicated on the idea that there will be conflict in the homeland, and there will be stay-behind forces composed of civilians operating in tandem with an exiled government. That does not need to be true for the concepts in ROC to be applicable to what we're talking about here, okay? Civilian resistance operations. There are 3 groups in the resistance. Everybody thinks Wolverines, man. I mean, I'm of that same age, Wolverines, I get it. We're gonna be fighting in the hills. Not necessarily. You see how much gray's in my beard? The grayer this gets, the lower the likelihood I'm gonna be fighting in the hills. There are the guerrillas, there's the auxiliary, and there's the underground. The guerrillas live in places like this, away from population density areas, away from cities and towns, because they need to train in the environment. They need the PT, they need the operational experience, they need to understand how to support themselves off of this land and move through land like this without leaving a trace so that they can hit and run. They are the action arm of the resistance. Okay, they are the force, if you will, the tip of the spear. Tooth to tail ratio, it's something you hear a lot in the military. Tooth to tail, right? So depending on which military at what time we're looking at, the tooth to tail ratio is somewhere between 1 in 7 to 1 in 14. So for every person engaged in combat on the front lines, there's somewhere between 7 and 14 people that are supporting that one individual through other MOSs, military occupational specialties, from doctors to cooks to truck drivers to pilots to whatever, right? All to get the guys, the pointy end of the spear where it needs to be at the right place, right time. So from a guerrilla standpoint, it may make sense to carry a full-size combat handgun, chambered in what? I don't give a shit. I don't care. what it's chambered in. Ideally, from a logistical standpoint, whoever it is that's on this team of guerrillas, they're all running the same caliber. Because from a logistical standpoint, we don't want one guy with 40, and one guy with 357 SIG, and one guy with 30 Magnum, or whatever that new federal round is that they came out with. One guy with 9mm, another dude's running a 357 wheel gun. That's logistically hard to support. So 9mm, is it the best handgun round? No. Is it the most common? Yeah, 8 in 10 handguns around the world, 8 in 10 are a 9x19, 9 parabellum. Okay, so that means logistically, the likelihood of us being able to keep these things fed is higher than some niche caliber, even semi-niche caliber, okay? What does it need to have on it? The only thing that I think should be added, everything else is nice to have, but a need to have is a weapons light. That's all. For PID, positive identification of the target. Now, what you'll hear from people is, don't you know when you're shining that light around, the enemy can see it too? Yeah, but we got to remember, this is a secondary weapon, okay? Secondary weapon. None of us here are Navy SEALs running with that HK-23 offensive handgun that's this big, literally. It's this big with the suppressor on it, in .45 caliber, by the way. That's a gigantic gun, okay? This is a secondary weapon. This is a couple of pounds with, you know, a 19, 20 round mag in it. It's a couple of pounds. Pound and a half, 2 pounds maybe. I don't know, I haven't put it on a scale. My point is, the space and weight that this takes up in a loadout can be, I can hang another Rallyman pouch where this is on my belt and get another 90 to 120 rounds of ammunition for my main weapon in the same space that my pistol goes. Effective range of a pistol depends on who you're talking to. James Yeager, before he passed, used to shoot 200 or silhouette targets at 200 yards just for fun, just to prove that it can be done. And there's plenty of other people that can and do that as well. But generally speaking, the handgun is inside of 25 yards. Inside of 25 yards. Okay. And these are harder to shoot than rifles are. So I got 2 points of contact here and a much shorter sight radius with the pistol than I do with a rifle, where I have 3 points of contact and a longer sighting radius, or an upgraded sighting system, red dot, telescopic sight, whatever it might be. Okay, so these are just harder to shoot, and 300 foot-pounds. This little 9mm bullet has 300 foot-pounds in it. Okay, and that's 147 grain jacketed hollow point plus P, with 10% more powder. That is a good handgun round, says me. Your opinions may differ, and that's fine. We don't need to have we don't need to be comparing PPs, okay? Having the caliber and the load argument, who cares? Because this 300 foot-pounds, I've got 12 to 1400 foot-pounds in each round of 5.56 ball ammo, okay? So I'm better off using 5.56 from an efficacy standpoint, because 8 in 10 people shot with handguns survive. That's something to think about. Bear, what do you think about pistol caliber carbines? 300 foot-pounds. 8 in 10 people shot with pistols survive, with the average number of rounds it fired in a law enforcement engagement being 16 and a half, because the standard magazine for this weapon right here holds 17 rounds. So they dumped the gun. Thank you, Clint Smith. Okay. So my point is, this is not terribly effective. It's not a primary weapon, it's a secondary weapon. So from a guerrilla standpoint, when you're patrolling raids, ambushes, all that stuff out here, there's probably not a good reason to have one of these. If you're in a static position, pulling security, maybe. Law enforcement role, sure. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about guerrillas, auxiliary, and underground. Now, in a previous video talking about ammo carriage, Somebody said, I don't remember who, they said it's next to impossible to carry all the stuff that you need to carry in order to self-support off the land and be able to fade at the same time. The Guerrillas fade back into this. The auxiliary, which bridges the two worlds between this and normal everyday life, it's the auxiliary that fades. Okay, the Guerrillas live out here. They're supported by the auxiliary in the underground. The auxiliary is like your reservists, your part-timers, okay? They're back in town doing what they do, working at the shop, working at the bank, working at the grocery store, working on the farm, because an army marches on its stomach, okay? But when there is need, they are called up for that specific mission, perhaps, or this specific campaign. The auxiliary comes in to support the guerrillas. The guerrillas stay out here. They don't come in and out of town because they can't be, they're much easier to target in town at population centers than they are out here, even with thermal and LiDAR and all of that. This is a large area out here in order to search that area, search this area for people. And there's a lot of terrain masking here, okay? When you get higher population density areas, the likelihood for discovery increases if you're a combatant. Also, carrying this around outside the waistband post-event could, depending on what the ROEs are, label you a combatant. This is a full-size Glock 17 Gen 5. Why Glock, not SIG? But I don't care. I don't care. It doesn't matter. What polymer frame striker fired 9mm pistol should I buy? I don't care, because it doesn't matter. Find one that you can shoot that fits your hands. Put at least 1,000 rounds through it. And not just dumping at the target, but actually making hits from all positions under stress. That's what I care about. Can you actually shoot the thing? So from a guerrilla standpoint, do I need this? My answer is no. I need the space that this occupies and the weight that this takes up to be occupied by more magazines for my main weapon. From an auxiliary standpoint, do I need a pistol on my loadout? Maybe, depending on what we're doing. So there's a transitional property there. I may be better suited with one of these, depending on what we're doing. I may not be. I probably want the same thing that the Guerrilla has, which is I need more ammunition for my long gun. Depending on what we're doing, it might make sense. You know, MET-TC, right? Mission, enemy, time, terrain, troops available, effects on civilian targets. It may make sense to have a pistol, but there's far fewer contexts where it makes sense out here to have a pistol rather than having 3 more magazines for your primary weapon. What happens when my primary weapon goes down and I need to transition? To what? Get the gun back up. I mean, pan that way. What am I going to shoot with a pistol out here? What am I going to shoot with a pistol out here that's not better shot with a rifle? Now, CQB, doing raids, right? Actions on the objective, maybe. Maybe it does make sense to have a pistol. My point is, it's not de facto. We got to carry around a full-size 9mm handgun. Well, then what roles do pistols play? Note, in standard bullcrap Amazon Kydex holster, I would recommend Ford Holster Company, but they are so swamped with orders right now that they've actually taken their website down so they can catch up. So maybe at the time of this recording, if you just happen to need a holster, just look up Ford Holster Company. If their site is down, that's because they're already so overwhelmingly blessed that they can't keep up. Okay, but any reputable holster manufacturer. IWB, is leather better than Kydex? It depends on what you're doing, but there's absolutely a place for leather as well. inside the waistband, smaller, more concealable. So now we get from Guerrilla to auxiliary and underground. The underground are the people that support the Guerrillas. This is the baker that instead of baking 10 loaves, bakes 12 loaves, and 2 of them go over here to the Guerrillas. Now, transpo and logistics is really important here because the Guerrillas have to stay fed. They have to stay provided for, if you will. They need logistical support. So as you're coming and going, from supporting those Guerrillas with the auxiliary of the underground, that's where you can get made. That's where people can figure out, hey, there's a pattern here, pattern of life. But whether you're the banker, the baker, the water guy, sewer guy, whatever you're doing in the coming unpleasantness, we probably want something that can be concealed. This is just a Glock Gen 5, Glock 19. Nothing special about it, other than the fact that it's in peanut butter, which I'm a fan of. And it has a little tiny Olight PL Mini on it. Am I a fan of Olight? They're better and there's worse. The biggest thing I don't like is that it has a proprietary charger, not just from other light brands, but from other Olight lights as well. That's really annoying because now I need 2 different things to charge my Olights. I need one for the larger ones and one for the smaller ones. That's a pain in the ass. And it's always been my experience that when I need something that's rechargeable, that the battery's dead. Like always. Well, you should be better about maintaining it. Yeah, listen, if I'm having a hard time keeping that shit maintained now in normalcy and peace, what's that gonna look like when there's strain on every system that exists? So it's just a little Glock 19. What about the 43? What about the 48? I don't care. I don't care. Get one that fits your hands. What about the Glock 26? I can't shoot a Glock 26 because it's like these 2 fingers are just dangling in the wind. But get one that you can shoot, that fits your hands, that you can make hits with, and get a holster for it. Put it inside of your waistband where you're not at a glance a combatant or a potential combatant. Which then brings us to, what role does the pistol actually play in the coming unpleasantness? To be able to fight our way from wherever the threat is to something like this that we will talk about in another video. To get back to my rifle in the first place, or for, if you think about World War II, French resistance operations, Liberator pistols, single shot 45 cast garbage pistols designed to fire 1 shot, boom, into the back of an enemy soldier's head for battlefield pickup. Now I have a Sturmgewehr or whatever, right? Now I have an AK, now I have an AR, whatever it might be. Because I still, same loading, I still only have 300 foot-pounds. And it's harder to make hits and accurate hits with a smaller gun than it is with a larger gun. There's more felt recoil because it weighs less. They're harder to get a hold of if you have large hands because they're smaller. They have even shorter sighting radiuses. You should put a red dot on there. I hate red dots myself personally. I have a couple of pistols with red dots on them. I've shot thousands of rounds through them. I still don't like it. And it's battery dependent. Well, then your iron sight should be co-witnessed through your red dot. Yes, 100%. I'm not saying you're wrong for having a red dot on your pistol. It is not my preference. And it's not that I haven't used them before. I have 2 Glocks that have red dots on them, and you can see what I carry. I got a Gen 5 17 with night sights, and I got a Gen 5 19 with stock Glock sights. That's what I have. And weapons lights, little weapons lights on both of them. The weapons light on the other one was a TLR-1HL that runs on a pair of CR-123As. And I like that because if I know I have to do something, I can swap the batteries out on it. And they're the same batteries that go in the weapons light on my rifle, that go in my nods, that they just go in everything, go in my PEC 15. It's the same CR-123s. So I just bring a sleeve of CR-123s and I got batteries for all my shit. So back to pistol, right? This is auxiliary and underground in a concealed carry and potentially deep concealed carry. There's something to be said for those little single stack, very thin, small footprint. What is it, the 43X? I believe my wife has one of those. That's a tiny little gun. I can make that thing disappear on me. And nobody needs to know that I have it until I need it. And then if I need it, fight. Get the gun out and use it. So all that to say, the first thing I wanted to discuss here today was that there are different roles inside of a resistance organization. I don't do it with that hand, I do it with this hand. There are different roles inside of a resistance organization. One of which is the guerrillas. The guerrillas exist out here like this. They don't interact with the general populace. They're running raids and ambushes for specific, not willy-nilly, to achieve at the tactical level specific operational and strategic initiatives, strategic goals, to deny the enemy of their ability to operate in this environment, to persecute us, okay? This bridges infrastructure, food, communications, demoralization, hearts and minds, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's the auxiliary. The auxiliary is normal people that at some point interacts with the guerrillas, but otherwise it's just normal people that perform critical functions. The doctor, the nurse, the paramedic, critical. All of which, by the way, is intelligence gathering operations, or should be if you're doing it properly. The butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, all the logistical support that the guerrillas need, including the logistics to get it to the guerrillas, the fighting force that has standoff from the population density areas, because enemy troops tend to concentrate around population areas to suppress the population here, to take away, why? To take away the support infrastructure for the guerrillas in the hills. They can then go sweep through the hills, kill all of the guerrillas, all of the bad guys, and now we control this area. Okay, it's control of people. So the auxiliary is in the town, in the city, that operates with the guerrillas on occasion. Auxiliary comes to guerrillas when needed. Guerrillas are outside of population density areas, and they're not seen in town for weeks, months, years. So think about that when you're like, yeah, I'm gonna be a guerrilla. Okay, do you have a wife and kids? You ever gonna see them again? Who's watching them while you're out here doing this? And then there's the underground. The underground is part of that support infrastructure, underground railroad, logistics, supply, moving people, moving stuff, making shit happen, Ho Chi Minh Trail. They're not all the same thing. They're not all the same applications. And I bring this up because a lot of people in mutual assistance groups are like, Bear, I'm 58 years old, and you know, I was in the Army way back in the day, and I know a thing or two, but man, I can't fight anymore. I got a bad hip and a bad knee, but I know some stuff. What do I do? Bro, you're not the guerrilla. Don't be the guerrilla. Be the auxiliary. Be the underground. Probably be the underground. You should be operating at the operational level, not the tactical level. Maybe even the strategic level, because you've been somewhere and done some stuff. Okay, that's different than march that way 4 miles, go hit that target, come back, and you got 8 hours to make that happen, go. Two very different things. And so the loadout for these things and the capabilities for these different buckets, guerrilla, auxiliary, underground, is different. And it's different intentionally, because there's different levels of visibility and capability amongst these three different buckets. And so when we talk about pistols with a guerrilla, probably not Met TC dependent, probably not. I probably want more ammo for my long gun. Talk about auxiliary, maybe Met TC, depends on what we're doing, but I probably want more ammo for my long gun. Underground, probably pistol. Pistol reload, tourniquet stashed on you, blowout kit stashed on you, a knife that you know how to use. It's not some little thing, you know, a knife that is sharp and long enough to do the job. Which job? The job. In whatever grip you may prefer and whatever hand you may prefer, but also is common enough looking that, yeah, man, I cut strings and hay bales with that. On occasion, I'll butcher a chicken with it, all of which is true. Okay, so your loadout from an underground standpoint is like civilian EDC deep cover. I don't have anything on me, man. I'm just a normal looking guy. I'm just a guy that works at the auto parts store. I'm just a truck driver. I just drive a school bus. I just, all of which, by the way, are intelligence collectors, all of which are sensors, which need to be talking back to your S2 shop to bring all that data in and then turn it from information into intelligence, which then becomes actionable for the guerrillas, for the auxiliary, for the underground. So right now, carry whatever you want, however you want. Don't care, America. But if / when this thing kicks off, carrying around a full-size pistol outside the waistband in Indian country that's semi-occupied is probably going to get your head split open by a high-velocity small caliber round. And it's probably not worth carrying if you're running through the hills anyway, because that's 2 pounds of capability that doesn't do a whole lot for me out here, where I'd rather have that replaced with PMags that go into the rifle that does do a whole lot for me out here. I get more foot-pounds, I get better accuracy, I have more effects, internal and external ballistics are better, blah, 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 blah. That's my thoughts on it. Let me know in the comments if you're digging this series of videos, civilian resistance operations. We need to talk more about the roles of guerrilla, auxiliary, and underground as well. And so if you want to see that, let me know. I appreciate y'all very much. Thanks for supporting everything we do, Bear Independent, Refuge Medical. And I'll see y'all when I see you.